Hey guys. So today I'm going to briefly focus on 5 guitar-based jazz records that I love. My favorites might prove to be controversial because, spoiler alert, there are big legendary names missing, like Grant Green and Wes Montgomery, guitarists who are icons in the world of jazz. Just to be clear, it's not that I don't appreciate and or enjoy the work of these gentlemen, to the contrary. But I discovered jazz in the 80s, and while I love almost all eras of the genre, John Coltrane is a hero of mine, and Miles Davis is a giant in my book, and of course in history. Piano-based jazz like that of Horace Silver or Michel Camilo warms my heart, and I happen to really like newer guys like Brian Blade, Brad Meldau, Charlie Hunter, Sean Jones, Jason Moran, just to name a few. But none of those guys, with the exception of Charlie Hunter, are guitarists. And guitar is my main instrument of choice. And being a rocker, first and foremost, I really appreciated the rock influence on most of these records on my list. So back in the mid to late 80s, when my impressionable ears heard the albums on my top 5, I was very taken with these records, and now I want to share them with you. So, here we go.
Bill Connors, Steppin', 1985.
First on this list is quite possibly the hardest one to come by, since I believe it's not available digitally at the moment, so you'll have to do a little crate digging for a vinyl or CD copy. But I promise you, you will be greatly rewarded. Bill Connors is best known for his brief stint in Chick Corea's iconic Return to Forever band of the 1970s, recording and touring behind the Hymn of the Seventh Galaxy album, released in 1973. Connors says that he left the band because he felt they were going into a more rock direction than he felt comfortable with, a sound that he likened to the also iconic Mahavishnu Orchestra. All of this is very ironic, considering that Connors made 3 records that are very much in the fusion jazz rock style. Among them, this one. Step It is a trio record with Tom Kennedy on bass and Dave Weckl on drums, the latter of which will appear again on this list later. Throughout this album, Connors shows off his great guitar tone and master composition skills. So it's definitely an album worth checking out.
Steve Kahn, Public Access, 1989.
As the son of the famous lyricist Sammy Kahn, Steve had a background in music very early on, having studied piano and played drums in surf bands. But it was on the guitar that he would eventually make a name for himself, after leaving his native Los Angeles and becoming a very important part of New York City's jazz scene in the 1970s. After a handful of acclaimed solo albums and having played with the likes of the Brecker Brothers and Steely Dan, Kahn put together the groundbreaking group Eyewitness in the early 80s. Eyewitness featured Anthony Kennedy on bass, Steve Jordan on drums, and Manolo Badrena on percussion and vocals. This lineup, with Dave Weckl instead of Jordan on drums, is the group featured here on Public Access, a laid-back but tasty collection of tunes in the Latin jazz realm, but rendered in a very unique way by a guitarist who has always carved out his own terrain in the jazz world, and specifically within Latin jazz. Highly recommended.
Pat Metheny Group, self-titled, 1978.
He's often considered a soft jazz lightweight by casual listeners. But if you pay closer attention, you'll find that Pat Metheny is nothing of the sort, despite how accessible much of his catalog is. Metheny is an incredibly recognizable guitarist, and his quite diverse catalog includes folk-influenced jazz, straight-ahead tunes in a trio setting, collaborations with the great Ornette Coleman, and the Avant Noise album Zero Tolerance for Silence. But this one, his second album, and the first with the Pat Metheny Group, is a desert island disc for me. It's also the only one on this list not from the 80s. It's a solid record all the way through, but my go-to tracks are San Lorenzo, Phase Dance, which has become a modern classic, modern standard, yeah, and the tribute to his friend and the bass player on his debut album, the song Jocko. Breathtaking.
John Schofield, Blue Matter, 1986.
John Schofield is one of those guys who you can immediately identify within a couple of licks. Or it's somebody trying to copy his tone and style. Which is why his guitar playing is one of a kind. And on this album, he's got the great Dennis Chambers on drums. Oh, man. It's a solid record all the way through. But my favorite tracks on here are Now She's Blonde and The Nag, which is a full-on workout that has to be heard to be believed. Stellar playing, great record.
Mike Stern, Upside Downside, 1986.
Last but certainly not least is one of my favorite guitar heroes, regardless of genre, and another Miles Davis alumnus. This guy is such a monster player that his nickname is Chops of Doom. Yeah, you heard right. And this, his first American release, is an album I discovered right around the time it came out in 1986, and I have never strayed since. Produced by the late Hiram Bullock, who also played guitar on Scofield's Blue Matter, and was in the original lineup of the Late Night with David Letterman band. I love this album in its entirety, and it's my hands-down favorite on this list. But the track on here that slays me, Mood Swings, also features legendary bassist Jaco Pastorius in his last recorded performance, the late Bob Berg on sax, and once more, Dave Weckl on drums. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and maybe motivated or inspired to check out some of these albums on your own. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and also please visit henrymena.bandcamp.com and check out my catalog. See you next time.